Go ahead, Kaushik.
Let's give it a minute or two. I believe the people are joining. Yep. Let's give it a minute or two. All right, let's start. So good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon as well to many of our folks who have joined from the East Coast too. And good evening if any of you who have joined from Asia as well. And welcome to the Fireside Chat today on PCI 4.0. I know PCI 4.0 has created quite a buzz in the market, or let's say in the payment industry specifically. Lots of requirements, lots of approaches, and number of things have changed. And I know that, okay, all of you are quite eager to understand that, okay, what all things have changed and how exactly your organization has got impacted because of this new standard, because of this new approach as well. And over here, we will answer majority of your questions, okay? And if, let's say, we are not able to, you can always write back to us and we'll be able to, let's say, we'll be very happy to answer any of your pending questions as well. So need not worry. But at the end of the day, or let's say at the end of the hour, all of your questions will be answered, whether online or offline at any point in time. So just to quickly start, and I'll not spend too much time over here on CISA. So we are a forensics-driven company. We started way back in 2006 onwards. So more than a decade, or let's say 15 plus years of experience we have in payment security specifically. We call ourselves one-stop shop for all the PCI offerings. However, today we are proud to say that, okay, we are a one-stop shop for all the cybersecurity offerings as well. And we are globally recognized by majority of the payment brands along with Crest, PCI DSS, and let's say the others as well follow the same pattern. So this fireside chat will be another 60 minutes. 45 minutes will be the, let's say the exact session. And the rest of the 15 minutes will be around the Q&A. All the participants over here, all the attendees will be on listen-only mode. You can submit your questions using the Q&A section, which is at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to quickly have a check on it, you will be able to see it on the bottom of your screen, the Q&A section. You can use it for any other thing. So now we have the speakers for today. I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Rebecca over here, who is the Chief Cybersecurity Strategist. She is the Global CISO, Privacy and Risk Officer, and number of different things. If I start, then I believe that, okay, we need to have one fireside chat only to introduce Rebecca. That's how it goes. So that's how Rebecca is. And I'll just introduce, I'll just allow Rebecca as well to speak for 2 minutes. But before going over that, we also have Shannon, who is the principal at CISA. And in each and every meeting, wherever I go, and I introduce Shannon, I start with this, that Shannon has been a PCI QSA before even PCI SSC was born. So he has been with Visa from 2004 onwards, let's say the Visa CSP from 2004 onwards, and he has a number of years of experience. And myself, Kaushik, let's say KP, I take care of, let's say the North America market on behalf of CISA. I had been a PCI QSA in the past, and I have been done a lots of audits at the same time. So without further ado, let me invite our chief guest, Dr. Rebecca, to speak a few words that, okay, what exactly the people, or let's say the participants should anticipate from this. Some intro from your end as well will be helpful. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you very much. Great introduction. So I'm Dr. Rebecca Nguyen. Please follow me up on LinkedIn. I'm always putting up positive quotes, paying it forward. I've written like 7 ebooks, co-authored 7 ebooks, co-authored 2 other books, do a lot of writing in the industry, help mergers and acquisitions, help equity, help that's private and venture capitalists, technology, healthcare, fintech, and a plethora of other people. My whole core value is to pay it forward. And I thank everyone for having me here today to try and give a CISO perspective and what PCI 4.0 means to us and how we should be preparing.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rebecca. And I believe that Rebecca cut short her entire introduction into pretty concise way. I know that so any of you just go ahead and look at her profile itself. It will be a good read for you. Okay, your entire day will be done. That's how it is. Shannon, what do you? Some intro, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kaushik, and thank you, Rebecca. So yes, my name is Shannon Swanson. I'm the principal and head of delivery in North America at CISA. As Kaushik mentioned, I've been a practicing QSA since it was Visa CISP around 2005, I think. I've always also a previous PA QSA. I've run several national level PCI practices in my career. I've also served as a primary PCI subject matter in-house, both at Capital One Bank and Navy Federal Credit Union. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Shannon. All right. So I believe that then need not be a time check because we are exact on time. So we have finished our intro in 5 minutes, which is a record time itself. So let's see a quick recap, or let's say a quick things on PCI 4.0 as to when exactly it's launched, what exactly the timelines look like, how exactly organizations should be prepared for the implementation, for the requirement understanding, and so forth. So if you'll see in Q1, that is just a few months, or say a month back or something, the entire world saw the release of PCI 4.0. In Q2, we'll be having the PCI Security Council will be arranging trainings for the ISA and the QSA so that they can get an idea as to how exactly the standard has changed, how exactly the assessor should be doing this PCI 4.0 audit, or let's say assessment. In PCI terms, it's not an assessment and not an audit. Two different things altogether, but that's not the agenda of this meeting. All right. So Q2, that's something which will be done. Then between Q1 to Q2 in 2024, that's where PCI DSS version 3.2.1, the current standard will, let's say, retire. And laid back in 2025, that is March 31st, that's where future dated requirements will become effective. So for those of you who might or might not know PCI DSS 4.0, how it goes, or let's say PCI, how it goes is that whenever PCI introduces a new standard in the market, they give something known as a breathing period, okay, or let's say a sunset period as well. So when I say sunset period, it means that, okay, whichever new requirements have been introduced by PCI as of now, those will be acting as a, let's say, as a best security case, or let's say best practice to be followed. They will not actually become a requirement per se, okay? PCI gives, let's say, 18 months to 2 years for organizations to adapt to these particular requirements or controls, and then accordingly start following it as a PCI requirement. Of course, as a best practice, we always say that, okay, go ahead and implement it as a requirement, but PCI allows you for that particular time period. So if you'll see over here, 31st March 2025, that is the time period when all of these new requirements of PCI, which are there in version 4.0, will actually become a requirement. Till that time, there's a best practice. Means organizations can implement it, absolutely. But if, let's say, you haven't implemented those, let's say, requirements, then you will not be considered that, okay, you are non-compliant. Not at all. That's the best practice till 31st March 2025. And that's why at the bottom of your screen, if you'll see, you'll say that is the implementation time period for the entire thing. So the transition period is till, let's say, Q1 end of 2024, because that's when 3.2.1 will get retired. So organizations can no longer get certified on 3.2.1. However, the best practices will actually become a requirement starting from 31st March 2025. Although I know that, okay, we see that, okay, it's a huge time period that, okay, we have a lot of time, and accordingly we'll be able to. But believe me, guys, version 4.0 is a radical change. It's an entire change from the way we used to see PCI in the past. So please be prepared for this, and that's why we say plan, do, check, act. I know this particular thing has been taken up from the ISO standards, the PDCS ACL, but I think that it goes well as well with the current PCI 4.0, where you have the transition period and the implementation period, and when exactly you have to plan, then start doing it, then check it, check the controls, check the requirements, how exactly you have implemented the same, and then act on it. That's how you should be going. That's how organizations should be going. So without any further things, let's start with the fireside chat, and I'll just stop sharing my screen so that you can see the all the speakers on the board. All right. I believe that, okay, so how exactly it will go, and just I'll give all of you a brief about it, that myself and Shannon, both of us will be bombarding Dr. Rebecca with a lot of questions. And as Dr. Rebecca has n number of years of experience from industry, she'll be able to help with the pain points as well from the industry, as like organizations are suffering really, like what total challenges they are having, and how exactly industry is seeing this new standard, this new PCI suite of controls over here. So Shannon, if you would like to kickstart things over here, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, KP. Rebecca, so here we are, new year, new full release of the PCI DSS in version 4.0. In your eyes, what was the need or needs for this, for a new standard this time around versus 3.2.1?
Well, this was actually brought on by the industry. The industry was saying, hey, we need this improved, and well over 200 companies actually had input into this over 3 different renditions. So it's not something that a couple of people just decided upon. And the reason for that is we have all the emerging threats, the cyber actors out there. If you don't realize it, we're in the cyber world at all points in time, and we have to keep upping our game. So it's building in security, compliance, privacy into your fabric. And we haven't really done a great job on that. This is not the only regulation you see that's putting that in there. We see the NIST 853 R5 and other regulations doing this well too. So some of the companies out there who are already involved in those regulations and starting to put some good things in place, you'll find some similarities around there. The other thing you see is if you have cybersecurity insurance, you'll find out cybersecurity insurance is already starting to push you to some of these criteria as well. So that's the reason why getting rid of ambiguity, being able to deal with cyber threats, and get people to realize that this needs to be part of your culture all the time. It's not a checkbox. We got our compliance, now let's unreverse our controls. You can't do that and survive in today's market.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, Rebecca. So on the same lines, Dr. Rebecca. So I believe that the new standard, as we say, is a transformational change, right? So when we talk about transformational change, and especially for mammoth organizations who have been implementing PCI, let's say from the donkey ages, right? They might take a lot of time as well to, first of all, understand the requirement, then adapt to it, then implement it, and then accordingly get compliance as well at a later point in time. So based upon your understanding of the entire PCI DSS 4.0, what do you think will be the typical timeline for a particular organization to, let's say, adapt and then implement and then accordingly go ahead?
Yeah, you need to start yesterday. Yeah, so the hope and pray it's going to be okay is not going to be a good framework for you. What you really need to do is you need to go ahead and have your team sit down with 4.0. You need to be compliant with 3.2.1 now. That's the starting point. You need to go ahead and see that you're going ahead and that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing today. And if you had your certification yesterday, that you're still doing it today, and look at that gap analysis so you can determine where you're really going to need to be from an infrastructure perspective, from a training perspective, personnel perspective, managing perspective. So you need to start today. It's less than 2 years. March 31st, 2024 is just around the corner. And what I always remind people is you literally don't know what a world event might hit us again that could cause you to have time and resources shifted other places. So really get that part of your strategic plan right now so you can line up budgets and people. And then remember, like we said, there's some best practices. Really, you should have an effect by March 31st, 2024, in my opinion, and your legal contracts might call you to have them in place then, even though those new requirements for PCI perspective doesn't have to be put in place until March 31st, 2025. But those you contract with, maybe you're upstream, they might require that sooner. So really get on that really quickly.
Fantastic, Dr. Rebecca. I believe that this is something which, let's say, all the participants should note as well, that many of the things are driven based upon the business. Well, I say all the things are driven based upon the business, but many of the things are driven based upon the contractual requirements as well, which you have with your service providers, with your merchants, or whosoever is up the line, right? So you'll have to look at it, and maybe at some point in time, PCI is giving you some more time to implement those requirements, but those contracts might say that, okay, yes, you have to comply with PCI 4.0 requirements or controls, then you have to comply with it, right? So thanks a lot for that, Dr. Rebecca. Shannon.
Yeah, I would just add that we're already seeing, I would say, our more mature organizations already starting the gap analysis phase. As Rebecca mentioned, they've got partners that are asking PCI 4.0 questions, clients of theirs that are asking that. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that activity as well. Rebecca, does 4.0, in your opinion, cover better evolving or evolved technologies such as cloud or Internet of Things? In the past, some of those were written towards kind of older technologies and the controls. Just wanted to see your opinion on that.
Yeah, absolutely, because it really didn't say anything that much about cloud. So now there's requirements for cloud providers, what's expected of them being able to go ahead and show that they can meet requirements. It also gives you more flexibility on showing you how you're using cloud and using it smartly, and how those controls are being put in place. So we'll be probably talking about that a little bit later, but that gives you the flexibility along those lines. If people are saying, hey, I haven't even looked at this, NIST, other places like that do have guidance around that, how you can go ahead and be testing APIs, how you can go ahead and work better with your cloud providers to go ahead and make sure they're doing their due diligence, as well as how you're using those very mindfully. I should also note, especially recently in the news, you had Google, you had Apple, you had other Microsoft who talked about them using biometrics and stuff like that, actually to be able to connect better into their applications, higher level authentication through multi-factor authentication. So you have other companies out there who are going to be pushing you that way if you're not already pushed that way. So I think it's a great thing and something you need to be mindful of.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot for that. So so before dropping the big question over here, I believe that, okay, in the payment industry itself, right, there have been n number of different changes there, technological changes, a number of different things happening. And I believe that it'll be good to categorize them under evolution and revolution, both of them, right? Where the evolution will talk about the front and the back end parts, or the front and the back end systems, like let's say instant payments are there, bill payments, blah, 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 and everything, how exactly it's changing. Especially during the COVID times, we have seen that the cashless transactions have skyrocketed like anything. Many of the, I believe that once a survey was conducted by PwC, another 89 to 90% of the people agreed that the e-commerce push is way more. And accordingly, let's say the web applications, the mobile applications will be flooded all across, right? And then comes the revolution, where we talk about the structural changes to the payment mix and things, where we come out with buy now, pay later, or let's say the cryptocurrencies, central banks coming out with their own digital currencies and things like that, okay? And at the same time, I'll say that just as soon as the, let's say the pandemic just got over, PCI came out with the new standard. And PCI, whenever the industry looks at PCI, they always look at PCI from a technical perspective. They say that, okay, yes, PCI is there. They will be top notch in let's say the technical standard, the technical requirements as such. And I believe that the entire audience as well over here will be, let's say, very eager to know that, okay, how exactly technical changes have happened in PCI 4.0 and how exactly it differs from the other standards. So Dr. Rebecca, if you can throw some light on the same, it would be really helpful. Dr. Rebecca.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I will say that there's a lot. I actually have made a couple of notes. I wanted to make sure there was like 13 points I wanted to at least call out to have on your radar, but there's more. One of the things is that, hey, full disk encryption, right? Best thing out there. We've known for a long period of time that full disk encryption in of itself no longer is a safety net, right? It's a better net than nothing. So one thing is, companies out there, if you're just using full disk encryption, you're not looking at other ways to do how you're doing your cryptology, things along those lines, how you're using your ciphers, things like that, you're probably gonna have to spend some time and resources in that and evaluating that. So you can go ahead and bring that up to the newer standards. So that's one place that I wanna make sure people realize. You're gonna take a look. You might have some other dollars outlay if you haven't already started moving that way. Bigger companies have already started moving that way. Small, medium might not have started moving that way. Multi-factor authentication is another place. Many of you in your cybersecurity insurance have realized that they're saying, hey, you're doing remote desktop, things along those lines. You need to have multi-factor authentication in. Having your own authentication server no longer works. We want you to use a third party to be able to authenticate. And some of you guys have moved that way. But now you want to do it down into the card environment. That means that you might have to buy some more licenses. That means you might have to be training up some more people. You might have to have some other things along those lines. So that's another place that you're going to have some outlay. See where I'm going here. You need to make sure that you're doing this today so you can start doing your budgets. When we look at applications, we look at systems and how quickly do we actually flip those passwords and things like that. Wasn't really a strong criteria in 3.21, but now we do. NIST in places like that always went ahead and said, hey, you need to be changing those service passwords, shared accounts, things along those lines. Now you need to be thinking about that more mindfully. Now you need to say, when can I do these? And how is it going to impact the business? You know, hope and pray it's going to be okay is not going to be a good factor. So that means that you might have to buy a vault, you might do some things along those lines that you can do it, the timing with business, things like that. And that's another reason why you need to start looking at these right now. Log review. Many of us already have a SIM in place, but not everybody has a SIM in place. They might be using some other methods. You do have to have a SIM or a next-gen SIM on steroids, I like to call them. That's going to be a big outlay for many companies. And then you have to think about who's going to be watching all those alerts. Are you going to go ahead and augment someone else, hire an outside team to be able to do that for you? You're going to hire internal people to do that, or you're going to train internal people to do that? That's going to be a significant outlay if you don't have that already in place. No longer going to be an option. So get that undone. Vulnerability scans is another area. Now you need to go ahead and make sure they're authenticated versus unauthenticated. That might mean that the software or the systems that you're using, the platform you're using, maybe you'll have to change out that platform because maybe that platform doesn't support that. Also means that you're going to have to, how are you going to have eyes and ears watching those authentications, right? You're going to make sure you do that. More equipment, training new people. Another place that you're going to have outlay, personnel, finance, budgets, training, and then how you're going to do that very, very mindfully. Third-party service providers is really big because now they have to support pen testing. If you looked in your contracts, most of the time when you have third party, they're like, you can't do pen testing of us. I don't blame them. But now you're going to need to make sure that you have eyes and ears and be able to go ahead and make sure that they can attest to you that they're meeting the PCI requirements for that. So you're going to have to go ahead and have people watch that. You're going to have to go ahead and make sure that that's mindful. It might also mean that you have to change out some service providers. Maybe you have some service providers who no longer want to even be in that area anymore. So be mindful of that because you know it's going to mean a lot. The other thing is that most people say, I just have to worry about this every 12 months, right? Right? Hope and pray it's going to be okay. Remember, 100% of data breaches due to PCI is because 100% of the time you were not compliant in some area. It's got to be part of your fabric at all points in time. But now you're talking about every 6 months being able to attest that. Personally, for your downstream vendors, I would have them sign off every 3 months if they haven't made any significant changes because they can negatively impact you. But results of those changes, again, time, resources, planning with the business. It might be the rollout of their products when you need to be doing testing. You really need to get that into the fabric ahead of time, strategic. And then the other thing is that when you talk about roles, responsibilities, for small companies and medium companies, it might not be as big a deal. You could use a RACI matrix to go and say who's going to be doing what. You need to be very specific. But larger organizations that are international, multi-product lines, different things along those lines, trying to go ahead and make sure that you have roles and responsibilities really well defined and who's going to do what and which geographic location, things like that. A RACI matrix, really going to be really tough to go ahead and keep. You might have to find another way to go ahead and do that, but you need to be very, very clear on that. Another great thing, I think, and I've always had people do this, I think it's from my government background, is when you look at what ciphers, what cryptology is in place from end to end, right? That should always be part of your architecture. Now it's mandated to be part of your architecture. You know, how are you doing that? If you're using SSL, if you're using 256, what are you using? You need to go ahead and write that all the way throughout your architecture. I always think it had been best practices before, but now it really, really is in fact that you have to play. Those are just a couple of areas. And if you're not already heart beating a little fast, great, you must be totally set. But those are a couple of areas that that are in play. That's why you need to think about budget, personnel, working with the business and planning this into your products and your rollouts and things along those lines. Shannon, do you have anything else to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I just would highlight kind of what you said, which are a couple major themes, which are assess early, start doing your gap analysis or assessment of your environments to see where your gaps are, plan well in advance, and budget. There's a good chance that some technologies, like you said, some different things are going to need to be bought and spent money on. Start early.
Great, guys. So I believe that Rebecca, in a very concise manner, Dr. Rebecca has already addressed majority of the technical changes or technical security requirements. What are the things are going to change? Those are the major ones. A few of the minor ones as well, which are there, like a web application firewall. So a web application firewall, guys, is coming mandatory. Just look out for it. If you do not have it, plan for it. So the next gen firewalls is the way to go. That's how I see it. Apart from that, PCI has been monitoring and saying that because there's iframe integration and n number of URL redirects and things like that, organizations are getting impacted. Honestly, many of the organizations do not even know that do they need to comply with PCI? They do not need to, because I've just integrated an iframe. I don't even control the PCI flow. Do I even need to comply with PCI and everything, right? First of all, you need to. There are different SAQs for the same. We are not going to address that topic over here, but yes, you need to. Now, secondly, coming back to the topic, they have also included one particular requirement where they are saying you should have security controls, so that if there are scripts which are embedded on your payment page, that should also get secured as well at the same time. Okay. There's something as customized approach as well, but we'll be addressing that particular thing later. So need not worry. We have that particular topic as well with us. But yeah, these are a few of the major changes, critical changes, I should say, which has happened. And the authenticated scans. It looks easy, but believe me, guys, it's not. It's really not. As soon as you start performing authenticated scans, and if you are not doing it till date, your vulnerability list is going to explode like anything. You will have like 5x or 10x vulnerabilities, whatever you had till date. And the real challenge is that this time PCI is not letting you go even with the low or the medium ones. They're not saying that, okay, you have to close it within the quarter, but they're saying based upon your risk assessment or risk management skills, you have to give a timeline. You cannot just say that, okay, they're low and medium and I'll not close it at all. That's not the case. So you have to come out with an approach with the methodology where you have to address those low and the medium vulnerabilities as well at any given point in time. The password requirements and all those things have been perfectly addressed by Dr. Rebecca. Now it has, let's say, something with the behavioral analytics is also something which, if you'll see in the finer words, PCI is trying to come out with that, where you need not have the exact password requirements, but if your account requires that particular kind of, let's say, a password security control, then accordingly you can implement, otherwise you can skip it as well. And the length of the password has been increased to 12 as well. Even that's one particular thing which has changed. So, and lastly, now we are not just talking about the users, like let's say you and me, we're also talking about application accounts, system accounts as well. Okay. Earlier, this was not addressed by PCI. But this time they have gone beyond and said that, okay, application system level accounts as well are required, which are interactive logins. So if you have it, you have to, let's say, make sure, things like that. And lastly, hard-coded passwords, hard-coded credentials, a strict no-no. I know it looks easy, and many of us can come back and say that, okay, KP, why exactly in 2022 somebody will have hard-coded passwords? But believe me, guys, when you're looking at legacy applications, legacy softwares, even the current ones as well, I've seen so many times. Okay, you have hard-coded passwords, hard-coded credentials. Now PCI is saying a strict no to it. It means that, okay, by 2025, if you have these legacy things on board, then you have to think through, you have to revamp the methodology, the architecture, and many other things as well on the same line. Okay. So on that particular note, Shannon, over to you.
Thank you, Kaushik. So Rebecca, in terms of governance in 4.0 for merchants and service providers, what are the significant changes that you see in terms of governance?
I'm going to flip that just a little bit because I'm sure we can get into a little bit of the governance and the levels and stuff like that probably in the Q&A. And I just want to add one quick point on Kaushik's point. You guys, don't forget to look at your code. It's not only about when you go ahead and you look source code, but is your code and your legacy code, you have embedded credentials there too. That's you need to get rid of it. And the WAF as well, if you don't know, cybersecurity insurance is making it mandated for many companies. I just ran into that 2 weeks ago. So if you're not on it, get on it. But the one thing I wanted to take a look when you talk about governance, I really want to talk about the legal perspective. People forget about one of the things is that as these requirements become even more depth about how we're doing this, and then we're going to be talking about how there's a little bit more flexibility in explaining how you're meeting compliance. When you get data breaches and you end up having to talk about that, all of this stuff is going to come into play, right? And remember that your QSRs, they're usually, that information, they're usually not under a privilege. And a lot of times they don't have things like that in place. So keep in mind that you're going to be sharing more information with your QSRs and may or may not be legally privileged. So you really want to work with your legal teams on defining that well and make sure that you understand that you should assume, unfortunately, even if you do your best efforts, that you're going to go ahead and you're going to have a data breach. And then you're going to have in all the documents that you prepare is going to have to be going ahead and shown in a court. So make sure that all the assessments that you do, all the internal risk assessments you do, all the documentation you do is very well created, tells the truth at all points in time. If you have a gap, things like that, because you should really prepare yourself that you perhaps might have to show this in a court of law. So I really want to make sure that people have that on the radar because I don't think enough people do have that on the radar. Shannon, I'm sure you might have some other things to your own question.
I mean, that's a great point. Make sure it all stands up because there are going to be scrutinizing eyes looking at them that you maybe didn't plan for at one point. So yeah, great point. KP? Yeah,
absolutely. So I believe that in 3.2.1, PCI came out with the requirement of PCI DSS Charter. And that was the first time when, let's say, PCI started talking about the executives as well. And they clearly mentioned over there that if a requirement or a control you're not able to maintain, it's not just, let's say, the administrators who are responsible. You as an executive is also responsible for the same. That's how PCI started 3.2.1. And in this new standard, I believe the second requirement, the second sub-requirement of each and every requirement 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right, is talking about the accountability of that particular requirement or the control. Starting with requirement 1, which talks about network security controls, going deeper into requirement 12, which talks about the governance and things like that. And believe me, guys, this time, risk assessment, risk management will be playing a very, very crucial role in PCI 4.0. It's going to drive the entire standard. Till this time, and because I have been an assessor, right now I'm not. Right now I'm not a QSA, but I have done several audits in the past. Risk assessments, many of the organizations used to do just for a checkbox that, okay, they have a risk assessment report and that's it. And they didn't even care about that, okay, what's happening, what's not happening. Many of the times when we interviewed people who have actually done the risk assessment, they had no idea what is the difference between risk treatment and the risk management, or is it the risk acceptance and the risk management at any given point in time, right? They didn't know that, okay, how to reduce the risk score as well. When it comes to external threats, they were going ahead and reducing the vulnerability value, the threat value as well. Although all of us know that, okay, the external threat, the external attackers, you cannot control. So the likelihood of occurrence of those threats will be there. It cannot be zero. Many of the times, many of the senior executives as well, when I had a chat, they said, okay, I want the risk to be zero. Okay, I said, that's not possible, right? You cannot have risk zero. You can have a risk zero if you do not have a business. As far as you have business, you will have a risk, right? That's how it goes. So in PCI 4.0, risk assessment will be playing a very, very crucial role, guys. So let's say if you guys haven't been paying attention to risk assessment, to risk assessment practices and all, this will be a good time to brush up your knowledge on either ISO 27005 or Octave or NIST or any other standard, whatever you seem fit, because PCI gives you the flexibility that you can adapt to any of the standard, but just do it for all the critical assets in PCI DSS scope. And that is one of the reasons why this time, as rightly being mentioned by Dr. Rebecca as well, multi-factor authentication. PCI now is not saying that, okay, multi-factor authentication is only required for admins. No, they are saying anybody who is accessing the card holder data environment, all those people need to have multi-factor authentication, because PCI has seen that majority of the breaches, whatever has happened, we would have been circumvented those breaches if multi-factor authentication would have been in place. Right. So that is how, let's say, the entire things are growing over here, just to give the context right for everyone. Okay. And that comes, let's say, another big question, another biggie for Dr. Rebecca over here is around the customized approach. So I believe the customized approach is one of the anticipated, you can say, the change, because we have been a part of the GARE committee, the GARE meeting, the stakeholders and all, and organization was seeking help. All right, that, okay, you guys are quite stringent, and how exactly we can go ahead and implement like this and a number of different things. And that's where PCI said that, okay, let me come out with an approach. They came out with a customized approach. So Dr. Rebecca, what exactly are your views on the customized approach by PCI?
Well, I think on concept, it can be dangerous. The reason I say concept being dangerous is when you have some companies could think that it's, oh, it's a loop so I can get out of meeting requirements. No, customized approach, he's really thinking from really mature organizations, probably more larger organizations who might be more on the cutting edge and using a lot of the technologies or using a mixture of those technologies in place to be able to go ahead and meet the intent of the control. And this gives them the flexibility to be able to explain that. And it's a harder path, because you're going to have to do assessments around that. You're going to have documentation around that. There are templates that you can use that they supply, but there's a whole decision tree. There might be a little bit of it's customized. Some of it's based on the regular metrics on that, but you have to be able to explain that very methodologically. You know, a lot of times I tell people zero architecture, stuff along those lines come into play along those lines, but don't think about if you're small and you're medium, you're going like, hey, I can just say I'm going to meet it this way, not a big deal. No, that's a heavier burden, but it allows that flexibility. And one of the other reasons I do like that is as we talk about going to 2025, 2026, stuff like that, new technologies, new ways of doing things are constantly coming on, because we are in a cyber world all points in time. It allows companies to grow and expand with that and show how they're being mindful to go ahead and protect cardholder data and their intent of being able to meet those controls. So that's kind of a skinny answer on it. But for you in small, medium companies, large, if you just think that's going to be your get out of jail card, that is not what it means. Shannon, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great point. In fact, my early conversations with clients so far on this subject is, hey, we don't have to do a risk assessment anymore. We can do customized approach and everything's much easier. I've kind of flipped it and thought, well, I actually think it's going to bring a little bit more scrutiny to you. You're going to have to do targeted risk assessments to these areas that you want to change. It's not as easy as, hey, we can kind of do it how we want to do it. And that's what a lot of organizations, at least early on, I've seen have shown that they feel that that's the way it's going to work. KP, do you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, so customized approach is let's say in Dr. Rebecca's word, two-edged sword, right? It's a two-edged sword, which we have. It can benefit as well. However, at the same time, it can harm you as well, right? Both the things are there. Because if you'll see the customized approach, it's not just for the assessee, but it's also for the assessor as well. Means if you are thinking loud and saying that, okay, no, I will customize the requirement based upon my organization, based upon my requirement, then your QSA will be required to spend 2x or 3x of their time to customize the control, or the control evaluation as well, that how exactly they're going to evaluate this control. Because you are having a different control implemented over there. It's not as per the PCI, or so what exactly PCI asks for. So they will have to draft, let's say, different type of requirement objectives, different types of, let's say, the testing procedures and all, and then accordingly they have to go ahead. And that's not where it ends. As rightly being mentioned by Dr. Rebecca and Shan as well, there are n number of different procedures, processes, documentations, etc., which you have to maintain if you are willing to go ahead with the customized approach at any given point in time, right? So n number of different things are there. And I believe that when we started this entire session, we told as well that we might not be able to address everything at its entirety as 100%, but just giving you guys a glimpse, customized approach, there can be an entire, let's say, a dedicated fireside chat on customized approach itself. That's how big it can be. Because we can take a few use cases of a particular requirement, we can discuss those requirements, we can say that, okay, how exactly the control matrix and let's say other things needs to be drafted for each and everything, and then accordingly how to draft those, the customized approach. But just try to understand from this perspective that if you are trying to tweak in the requirement section or the customized approach requirement section, then n number of different things also gets impacted. The assessor, the SSC, everyone needs to, let's say, adapt to that particular customized approach, and then accordingly things can move forward. So that's how customized approach are going to be. And please do not consider customized approach as a compensatory control. Compensatory controls are different. They are still there. Customized approach is completely different. Over here, you cannot say that, okay, I don't want to implement the control, so I'll just go with a customized approach. No, that's not the intent. The intent, what exactly PCI thought at the back of the mind was that you have a huge organization and you have controls which are way beyond PCI. So the way beyond PCI minimum level of security requirements, right? Then you can come out with this customized approach so that the QSA can evaluate each and every stricter controls, stricter technologies as well, whatever you have implemented. It's not the vice versa. Just try to see that from that perspective, okay? Whereas compensatory control is more from a risk management perspective that, okay, I'm not able to, because of some business or technical justifications, I'm not able to implement this requirement, so I'm looking at a compensatory control. So both of these things are different. I know if you have any questions, then we can answer it later or let's say during the session as well, but that's how it goes. So Shannon, what do you?
Yeah, so my last question for Rebecca, we've talked a lot about timelines. We've seen slides, we're basically in the first part of a 3-year window to try to evaluate and get this implemented and compliant. How should organizations approach achieving compliance for 4.0 based on the timelines we've seen so far?
Well, as a starting point, you need to go ahead and take a look and see, are you really compliant with 3.2.1 and are you being compliant all points in time? Take a look at that and take a look at your gap analysis. What's the differential that you have right now going on to be able to meet 4.0? Be very mindful of that. That'll help you to go ahead and determine not only what security controls need to be put in place, but what structural changes might have to be placed for business processes, for infrastructure, for different things along those lines. Give you an idea what training might be needed, what you might need to purchase. So you're going to have to deal with procurement, things like that. It's also very important that you work with legal, because if you are actually answering to an upstream, what is their expectations? Are you going to need to meet the controls that are effect for March 31st, 2025? Do they expect those best practices to be in place in 2 years, not 3 years? The other thing that you need to do is you need to watch your downstream, right? You're dealing with call center operations and things along those lines. You need to be keeping on top of them that they're going to be compliant, because that's going to hurt you if they're not, right? You could be cut off. So I tell people it's a big process, upstream, downstream, and then are you doing your due diligence? We're only as strong as our weakest link. Remember, we're in a cyber war at all points in time. They just need to be successful once, and we got to be successful all the time. So start right after this fireside chat if you haven't already started.
Great points. I would just say start ahead. I mean, people should already be looking at this. If you have troublesome areas in your environment, or you've had issues in the past with your QSA, if you rely on service providers to keep you compliant every year, start asking those service providers ahead of time. start making the ask, because they're going to take some time to spin up and get compliant themselves. So, KP, anything from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with both of you, Dr. Rebecca and Shan, both of you as well. So how exactly I believe that, okay, organization should approach this is that, first of all, start reading the requirements, start reading the standard. First, understand the requirements, understand the standard, right? Because many things have changed. And that's why PCI is arranging a PCI symposium as well in June, where they are going to officially talk about the, let's say, the standard as to how exactly organization should implement it, should impart it, and things like that. So take a month or two to read through the standard, to understand the requirements and see its implications, its impact as well to your organization, to your technological controls, and then come out with a security roadmap, or to say a roadmap for the implementation of these requirements, right? Starting from scoping, as rightly being mentioned by Dr. Rebecca as well, that majority of the breaches, let's say happens is because the scoping was not done correctly. Majority of the card data was lying in the non-scoped areas without any controls, without any, let's say, security risk. So, that's just one of the things over here. But yes, that's how, let's say, organizations should start at any given point in time. And then they should start implementing controls block by block, so that, of course, because see, you cannot impact your business at any given point in time. I cannot say that, okay, I have to implement a web application firewall, so I'll block all the traffic. I cannot do that. I have to run my business. At the same time, I have to implement a web application firewall too. So you have to plan it in that particular manner. And I know that majority of the times when we perform assessment, when we perform audit, and we give the action points, or let's say the gaps, the gap assessment report to a customer, the customers come back and say that we don't have funds for the same. We do not have a budget for these many technological changes, whatever you are asking for. So that's why PCI has given you timeline, guys. Please do not come in 2025 stating that, okay, you do not have the budget for the same. PCI is giving you ample amount of time period, and they are very, very, let's say, fluent as well in explaining those requirements, those controls too. So you should make a list, or let's say an inventory of what all changes you need to do in the coming year or two. Start planning of this. Maybe if you guys want to go ahead and just be cloud native, go ahead, do that. Okay, but do something. It's not that, okay, you are just sitting idle and think that, okay, some tooth fairy will come and let's say give something or the other. That's not happening. I'm telling you guys, that's really not happening. So please work on the particular manner, and then accordingly you can go ahead. And one particular point which I missed in customized approach was that if you're an organization who wants QSA's help as well in drafting the customized control. So even PCI has given that option that, okay, yes, you can take the QSA's help in drafting the customized control for your organization or the customized approach, but you cannot use the same QSA for your assessment as well. That's how PCI goes over there. Conflict of interest. Okay, so if you have a QSA who is helping you with the customized control, customized approach, and all those things, please do not use the same for your assessment as well. Okay, that little thing I missed. So I thought that, okay, let me cover up over here as well. All right, that covers, I believe, all the questions, Shannon, right?
Yep, excellent, thank you.
Okay, so I believe let's go for the Q&A. I believe that, okay, we have a few questions down the line. Let me pull that list out. Okay.
Yeah, while you're pulling that list, I just want to make a notion that while people are ramping up, trying to understand 4.0, one active thing that you do is ensure that you're compliant with 3.21. Make sure that you understand what the strategic plan and projects that are underway in the next 2 years, so you can make sure that you embed the 4.0 requirements into those projects, instead of having that project comes to fruition and go, by the way, now you need to go ahead and change all the security, compliance, and privacy controls around that. No shock and awe for the business is good business. So make sure that you do those. I would start those today. I wouldn't wait 2 months to start those.
Great. Fantastic, Rebecca. All right, let's take a few questions as well. So first question is there, So what I'll do is that, okay, I'll start with the Q&A section and then I'll go to the chats as well, because I can see that many of you have given your question in the chat. So we'll go to the chats later. So the first question is that 4.0 brings into play multi-factor authentication to the CDE for any access versus past versions where this was only required for remote access. So basically, it was not required only for remote access, but if you see the current standard, the 3.1, if you're an administrator or somebody with an admin right, then you need to have a multi-factor authentication, irrespective if you're remote or not, but that's actually the requirement. So, so do you feel this will be tough to implement, and what will be the productivity be for the internal users accessing the CDE? Productivity, I believe that, okay, we might not be the right people to answer that, okay, how exactly productivity will get impacted. However, this particular requirement of multi-factor authentication, yes, it will be tough to implement. It will not be easy at all, because your common users who used to log in within, let's say, 3 seconds to 5 seconds, they might be taking 7 to 8 seconds or 10 seconds as well. And depending upon the number of users, that particular time period will amplify as well. And somewhere down the line, it will impact your business. But try to understand from this perspective that better safe than sorry, right? So today, if you go ahead and implement these requirements, these controls, and the multi-factor authentication and everything, then tomorrow you are much more in a safe ground, so that you do not get impacted because of a breach or something like that, right? So that's the approach which PCI wants to take over here. And yes, it's going to be time consuming for implementation. And yes, it's going to be time consuming for the others as well. But also look from this perspective that multi-factor authentication is not just those OTPs and all as well. You can have your hard tokens as well. You can have your soft tokens, which makes the entire process very easy for organizations as well to be done. It's something like something you know, something you have, and something you are. Just have 2 of them at least, so that accordingly you are much more secure. Dr. Rebecca, Shannon, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, I was going to say today's multi-factor authentication mechanisms are a lot faster and more efficient than they were 2, 3, 4, and 5 years ago. And we only will see that increase in efficiency. So obviously, will there be a slight nanosecond or 2? Yeah, but I don't find that being long-term negatively impacted. I think the security is well worth it. Shannon, what's your viewpoint?
I agree. And as Kaushik mentioned, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy from the card brands, from your acquirer for an extra log on, time or something like that. It's something that's going to have to be done. So.
Got it. Great. Awesome. Let's go to the second question, which we have over here. And it starts with, hello, Dr. Win. Okay, that's how it starts. So hello, Dr. Win. I want to know when the new requirements will be published. So the new requirements have already been published, and it's available on the PCI Security Standards.org website. It's freely available. And that's what I love about PCI, right? All the resources, each and everything is freely available, access to all of us without any charges. So you can go ahead, access the things over there itself. And I will not pass this particular question to the others, because the others will also have the same answer. All right. Okay. One more question is with regards to service accounts and mainframes. Okay. Although tough as downstream impact can be devastating. So any suggestions as to approach on that? Okay. So if we are able to understand the question correctly, it's about the service accounts which you have on the mainframes, as to how exactly you can implement PCI requirements or PCI controls in those service accounts, because PCI now is going ahead and not just talking about the user access, like let's say you and me, but even the service accounts as well. I believe that's the question. So if you'll see the thin line over there, or let's say the what exactly PCI is trying to say is that if they are non-interactive, right, then you need not implement the same requirement, the same controls. Okay. If they are interactive accounts, only then you are required to do that. So the service accounts, the majority of these mainframes and all are non-interactive accounts. So if it's not interactive, then of course, these things are not applicable to you. And I'll tell you as well why exactly PCI came out with this approach, or say with this particular requirement of system accounts or application accounts and stuff like that. Because in the past couple of years of breaches, they have understood that intruders, the hackers, have been using these system accounts to actually compromise systems, to compromise applications, to compromise databases and operating systems and things like that. And that's why PCI has come out with this particular requirement. And mainframes, of course, the service accounts which you bring, or let's say built on mainframes, are much more, let's say, secured in a secure manner. So I don't think that, okay, it'll get impacted on that particular point in time. Dr. Rebecca, Shannon, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, when you talk about mainframes, a lot of things come in places. It's also the other controls. It's access control, it's network segmentation, it's are you watching into traffic in and out, things along those lines when you deal with mainframes, just to add along with your answer.
Yeah, I agree. Just monitoring those accounts, the process by which you create and protect those accounts is very important. As you mentioned, KP, the root of some pretty big breaches is the service account usage. So yeah.
Got it. Great. So now let's go to the chat section because, okay. Okay. We have seen some companies using the storage level encryption at an array level to meet PCI DSS 3.4.1. Okay. Is it still acceptable in PCI 4.0? Some clients push it without understanding the spirit of the control. Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, then you are looking for an answer as if you are going ahead for an array level encryption, which is a disk encryption as well. Okay, will it be acceptable as per the PCI 4.0 or not? Okay, so based upon, let's say, the current limited purview what we have of the PCI 4.0, it might not be. Okay, that's our first answer over here, because they are typically talking about column level or file level encryption. That's what they're talking about. Okay, so if you have a disk level encryption, whether it's array level as well, it might not be able to serve the purpose what PCI is asking as for, and you have to come out with a column or a file level encryption to suffice the PCI requirement of requirement 3.4, or I think the requirement numbers also have changed. So you need to monitor that as well at the same time. Dr. Rebecca, Shan, if you'd like to add anything.
No, I agree with that. And there's other regulations around that too, where I'm saying, like, you see that in HIPAA, right? You see with the HIPAA data doing that same thing. You see the same thing with the 853 R5. It was R4 as well too. So there's other standards that have been requiring that. So if you're meeting those other standards, you should have people in your organization who should be able to help you go ahead and apply that to the PCI environment as well. Shannon?
Yeah, I would just say assess early. This is one of those it depends questions based on how you've implemented your environment. So start looking at it now. Start leveraging the relationship with your QSA. As I like to tell my clients, these assessments are point in time, but the relationship is not. So leverage this outside of that cycle to ask questions about this stuff so that when it comes to compliance cycle time, you're not having to backtrack, fix things, address things that we could have fixed at an earlier date.
Got it. Thanks for that, Shan. And as soon as you said backtrack, I could remember that before Kali Linux came, right? The older version of Kali was known as the backtrack. Okay, that's what the name of that operating system was. So I could just recollect that as well. All right, the next question. What's the acceptable privilege for authenticated scans? So typically when CISA as an organization, let's say we as an assessor performs authenticated scans, we say for full admin rights. That's how we go ahead. So that accordingly, we can go deep inside the operating systems and then come out with, let's say, whatever patches, whatever things you have guys have not implemented, and then secure yourself as well. Okay, so that's how it goes. And the next question I'll throw in for the team as well. How about using JavaScripts for user activity monitoring with tags to exclude PCI information? Okay, I'll read it again. How about using JavaScripts for user activity monitoring with tags to exclude PCI information. Okay. So I'm not sure what you mean by exclude PCI information over there. But if you are trying to use JavaScripts for user activity monitoring, and if you're trying to meet the requirement 10 of log management, I'm not sure. Then there are other things as well which you need to plan for it. It's not just the user activity monitoring, just a very, it's okay. It's not that simple, I should say, right? That, okay, you can have just a JavaScript for user activity monitoring. You need to have n number of different controls as well around it. And as Dr. Rebecca was saying that there's SIM solutions, the XDR solutions, MDR solutions, things like that are is a different beast altogether. So you need to, let's say, handle it very carefully over there. So that's what we understand. However, you can, let's say, write to us as well if we didn't understand the question correctly, and then accordingly we can answer it in a more, let's say, excellent fashion. All right.
Kajik, let me add one point quickly on that, just another point. If you're talking about a website scripting, whatever scripting language you're talking about, in 4.0, there is a requirement that you go ahead and you have monitored where you have that script library, that you don't have a nefarious actor who can go ahead and can deposit false scripts into that library. So that's one thing to also make sure that you understand about these new requirements as well too. You should already be doing it if you're not already doing it. So if you are talking about website scripting language and the language of choice, you can do that mindfully in a variety of languages, but you need to be monitoring that no one else can alter those scripts in any fashion whatsoever in 4.0. Shannon, you have a quick tag onto that? I think that's a very critical point about the website monitoring.
Yeah, I think you guys have covered it. Again, I think we're a little unclear on the question and the applicability of where it would be used, but, is it to access card data? Is it to access the CDE? I think we need a little bit more detail on that.
Got it. So, and we are already up on time as well. So whichever questions are pending, we'll be coming out with an FAQ as well. We'll just jot on all these questions with the answer that it's easy for all of us to refer to it at a later point in time. Just want to address this JavaScript one as well as at last. So if I'm not mistaken, then you're talking about that particular requirement where we're talking about that, okay, PCI has said that if you have embedded codes on your payment page, then you need to have stricter controls around it. If that's the case, again, if a big if over there. They're talking about payment page. Okay. So if there are any scripts which you are using on the payment page, then they have to be secured based upon the PCI requirement. That's how it goes. Okay. The payment page is of importance over here. Whatever you are doing on the payment page, it has to be secure. So if you're using for user activity monitoring or any other use case, whatsoever, you have to secure it based upon the PCI requirement. That's how it goes. All right. I think that's it. We'll not waste any of the thanks a lot, Dr. Rebecca, for let's say taking out time for us. And Shan, you too. Rebecca, any last words which you want to say, and we just wrap up the session.
Well, it was an honor and pleasure to be with you all here today. Remember, hope and pray. It'll be okay. Should not be your strategy. Start today.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Rebecca. Thanks a lot, Shannon. And thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in, and have a great rest of the week ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.